All right. Welcome back, rugby fans. It's that time again here on the Rugby Rant podcast show for us to be able to meet and do what we do best. Talk about rugby. And joining me here today is, of course, Rob the Hammerschmidt. And on behalf of Scott Ferrara, in his absence, we brought in some extra talent off the bench, always ready to tackle the topics, is, of course, Dave Fee, former USA Eagles extraordinaire. And I believe probably like 6 or 7 times here on the show by now. How many times is it, Dave?
Yeah, I don't know. It's like the Saturday Night Live, I'm like a 5-timer club,
Right.
I feel like Steve Martin.
All right.
It's enough that we're going to owe him a Rugby Rant outfit kit up or something like that from American Rugby Outfitters.
I like it. I like it for sure. Who doesn't love free rugby gear? I'm sure you would, right? Got enough of it. My wife always says, you've got enough in it. No, never is the answer. Never enough. So what are we here to do? Well, I remind our viewers at home that first up, before we dive into the familiar rugby rants on episode 104, I've recently been told by Rob by way of a hand signal. But we're going to leave it there because it's first important that we take the chance to be able to do what you now know as Around the Pitch. We'll be back with the news. And here we are, gentlemen, in this Around the Pitch segment. We're going to be taking time to be able to give you a quick fire round of what we think is noteworthy for you as the rugby fans, what you should be paying attention to. And we're going to kick it all off with Rob Hammerschmidt.
Thanks. I want to kick this first one off to pay special tribute to a guy who's putting my son back together, Pat Caulfield. Congratulations to you and your Naperville Warriors. He is the head coach for the Naperville Warriors Sevens program, and they won the Rugby Illinois Sevens Championship. They beat the Arlington Stallions, a really good program. Produced Matt Harmon, by the way, from the NOLA Gold. The Warriors won 31-26. I talked to him recently, and it was really cool. He said they scored a try with no time left on the clock to tie the match and put it into overtime, and then they got possession of the ball and scored right away to end the game. So a fitting tribute. Congratulations on your state championship, Pat, and his Naperville Warriors.
What an excellent way to be able to finish a final for those kids, right? That's the way you do it, right down to the wire. Keep it exciting. Keep everybody on their toes. Fantastic to be able to hear and see. We hand it over to Dave. What have you got to share?
Yeah, Rob, speaking of sevens, I had the opportunity to go out to Utah, out to Salt Lake City, and see the North America Invitational Sevens, the NAIA Sevens. There was over 110 youth teams. Mike Kressler does a great job out there in Utah organizing it. It's a phenomenal event, phenomenal facilities. Rebel Rugby, I think, had a great weekend. They won the U18s Elite as well as their U16s. Ethan Punier, I believe, is running that program. So it was just great to see a lot of positivity, great people working behind the scenes. Lisa Jackson, first-time winner, working behind the scenes with some of the Rhino women's team. So a lot of people working hard, a lot of positive things happen out there in the youth world. It was just great to see out in Salt Lake City.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Utah's got a wonderful rugby culture, but to be able to give it that platform is wonderful to be able to see it. And we're seeing more and more of this. And when it comes to sevens, one of the great contributors to the sevens game at a professional level is PR Sevens. And that's actually my next topic here, because this past weekend was the final leg of 3 with PR Sevens ending in Austin. It was a fantastic affair, as everybody expected. Now, interestingly enough, not only were you crowning a winner for that series, but also the series in total. And that left the loggerheads in the men's coming out on top over the headliners, 38-17. On the women's side, you had the headliners taking the top honors for the weekend over the Loonies. But overall, over the series itself, that meant that the combined total left the headliners taking top honors. And PR Sevens has become quite an exciting brand. We saw in its first iteration last year being just one event in Memphis. So it's great to be able to see how it's grown, to be able to take that on the road to 3 major cities across the U.S. and finishing in Austin, which has grown to have a great rugby culture of its own. So, yeah, hopefully we see much, much more of it in the future. Rob, what else do you have to share?
Yeah, I want to hit international side of things, congratulations to Rugby Canada's women's 15s team. They beat 6th-ranked Italy 34-24. Didn't in Langford, BC, by the way, didn't look to ever really relinquish the control of that match. They really stayed in control of it the entirety. This was their first home international test in 7 years. I think that's important to note. They certainly deserve to have more international tests, and there will be some coming up. I believe they're going to be playing Wales in Halifax August 27th, so stay tuned for that. Tries were scored by Paige Ferry, scored 2. Sarah, and I'll probably butcher this, Caljuvi, Emily Tutlosi, and of course, Captain Sophie DeGoody, who we've had on the show before. Mm-hmm. These are their final preparation matches, of course, before they head into the Women's Rugby World Cup. And interestingly enough, I thought this was notable. They will have beaten 2 of the 3 other teams that they play in their pool. The one that they haven't played yet and beaten is Japan. So really look to see if Canada can gain momentum from this going into Rugby World Cup 2022 here this fall.
Yeah, it's great to be able to see the levels that the game is reaching for all different parts of the sport. But the women's game in particular has made some significant strides, not only in the quality of play, but the viewership. When you look at TikTok taking on the title sponsorship for this upcoming Rugby World Cup, of course, in New Zealand, and all of this paving the way for great success for them there. So it's good to be able to hear that. Thanks for sharing that there, Rob. Dave, what else do you have to be able to share?
Yeah, a little bit near and dear to me here in the college game. It was exciting to see one Notre Dame join the Big Ten and then see them announce their schedule. So they're going to have an East and West Conference with the semifinal and final. I know Joey Rasmus at the University of Illinois is doing some good work putting that together, trying to make it a better event for the student athletes, for the universities as well. The final is going to be there at Ken Stinson Stadium there in South Bend on November the 12th. So it's exciting to see Notre Dame join the conference. I think it's going to up the level of competition. And again, right. 2 teams, both in Indiana and Notre Dame now competing, programs I've had a bit of a part of. It's going to be exciting to watch.
Yeah, and that's what we like to be able to see is you bring in this new blood into leagues and conferences like that. It's only going to better the quality of rugby, and especially with a school that has such a rich rugby history, it's great to be able to see it expanding like that. So I wanted to be able to expand on the Sevens thought for a moment as we dive into my last final piece over here. I'm going to be a bit of a homer on this occasion. I'm allowed to be. The title to my name, the nickname is The Saffers, so I got to go with something South African on this occasion, especially when it comes to 7. So I got to send a shout out to, of course, the Blitz Bokke, who successfully have not only taken many of the great titles available in rugby 7s at the highest level, the HSBC, but now more recently with the Commonwealth Games. For those in America who don't know what that means, it is one of the greatest challenges that you can have where you can receive a medal at an Olympic quality standard. So apart from the Olympics for South Africa, Canada, Fiji, and all those traditional countries that have come from the crown and its origin, they compete against each other, and South Africa took top honors in the final against Fiji, and that score was very flattering for South Africa, but a credit to Fiji, who are tremendous athletes as well. It's great to be able to see them still competing at that level and contributing to the game there, because without teams being as competitive as they are, teams like South Africa, New Zealand, Australia, they wouldn't be able to get better, and all the other teams. So shout out to them on that success. A gold medal is never, ever something to be shy about. So congratulations to the Blitz Bokke, and we wish them every success moving forward. As the Sevens Rugby World Cup comes up later this year in my hometown, Cape Town. Wish I was there. But, I was recently, got to be able to see Wales versus South Africa. That was cool.
Oh, really? I didn't know you went to the game. That's
on TV.
Awesome. Oh. Come on, man.
Tickets are expensive. All right, we digress, and we'll be back in just a moment with more rugby talk. Stick around.
This ball represents the game we love. A game fueled by passion. But there are those who wear no number, nor are they in the locker room or the field of play. But they are there for every high and every low. Yes, they are watching every kick, tackle, and try scored. Yes, they are there for when you need them most, because they are the Major League Rugby fans. And the time has come for you to stand with your team. Join us at shopmlr.com today.
Welcome back, rugby fans. And of course, it's that time to do what we do, and that's talk about rugby, continuing it here with the Rugby Rant debate. Now, before we dive into it, a reminder that this is pretty simple. We're going to be talking about one topic in particular, something that is of hot topic across all the social media circles, all the rugby fans out there, and that is talking about the USA pathway. Do they still have a shot? The answer is yes, to make a Rugby World Cup. However, they chose to do it the hard way by going through the Repechage Tournament, which is taking place later this year from November 6th, I think, until the 18th, if I'm correct. And that means that they will be entering a round-robin tournament with other nations who are pursuing the same pathway, that final qualifying tournament. We're going to be talking about it a little bit more over here with the help of Rob Hammerschmidt and Dave Fee, and of course myself, Ty Braga, your host for today's activities. Each one of us will be talking about how we got here, what we need to do to get there, and a couple of important points along the way that we think is notable as some lessons that have been learned along the way, because there's a lot of people that have been talking about this, gentlemen, how, of course, we started out with Uruguay. Traditionally, we've had some great successes against this nation, although we must note that they had a phenomenal 2019 tournament in Japan, most notably the upset against Fiji, which certainly said that they have grown. And so they've continued growing since then to get the America's number 1 spot. And then the number 2 spot, we had the opportunity to take on Chile in a 2-parter, home and away. And unfortunately, we came lesser on the occasion because we lost out in Glendale. I think it was by 1 point overall. Can you guys remind me? Was it 1 point?
Yeah, 1 point overall, 2 points in Glendale, yeah.
Right, but 1 point overall is as close as it came, and it was fairly similar against Uruguay. So it's always a story of so close yet so far, at least for the USA Eagles right now. And what that means is missing out on America's 1 spot and America's 2 leaves that last open door remaining for the Repechage Tournament. As I mentioned before, will take place later this year in November, competing against the sides. Let me remind myself here. It was Hong Kong, Portugal, Kenya, and that'll make up the 4 sides. So, gentlemen, I'm actually going to throw it over to Rob first to be able to hear your thoughts. How do we get here, and what do we need to do?
Oh, boy. Well, what do we need to do? Well, I guess I better start with how do we get here? I think we got here. And my guess is Dave is going to talk about it a little bit more. So I'll leave some meat on the bone for him in that regard. I think we need to spend a bit more time together as a unit. It's pretty clear from Chile and Uruguay that they had spent much more time together, and the cohesion showed. I talked about it in some previous rants. So we need to spend more time together. I think we need to secure our set piece play. That's pretty critical. I think our set piece play was lacking, if I'm not mistaken, against Uruguay. It was a little better against Chile, although it's some crucial moments towards the end of the game. It let us down a bit. So I'd like to see our set piece play improve. And with that, quality lineouts, I think that was the capstone of our 2 matches against Chile is quality lineouts. And we've proven that we can, get that, line out and drive if we can kick it into the corners. So I think it's really about, possession, about field position, about quality platforms for forward play. And then when the opportunities present themselves, get the ball out to Christian Dyer and let him do what he does best. Mm-hmm. So that's what I think we need to do. But but I'd love to hear it from a guy who's been around the international pitch himself on a couple of occasions, as well heeled in that regard.
And what a perfect handoff to Dave Fee.
Yeah, I'm here, supporting my roots, supporting my USA Eagles. I've been there. I've been in that locker room, feeling that, you've let a country down and wondering what comes next. Are we going to make a World Cup? And I was there in 2002, and we had some pretty good guys on that team. Dan Lyle, Luke Gross, Dave Hodges, Court Schubert, Mike McDonald, Dan Dorsey, Mike Herkis, Paul Emmerich. All these guys were professionals, and nothing's ever been easy for us as American rugby players, and this is no different. So if we've got to go fight and claw and scratch our way, through a 3-game series, I think in looking back, it may be a good thing for them. Rob, you hit on it that, the Chileans playing as Selknam down in the SLAR competition, I think they've had about 35 to 40 games where our guys have had 5 to 10, right? So that's a big thing, that continuity in a 1-point game, obviously, I think, was the difference. But I'm going to back my boys. And I think, an opportunity to go get 3 games against Kenya, Portugal, and Hong Kong could be, obviously added time together and some buildup that they need, looking forward into that World Cup where, again, should they qualify, and if I should say when they qualify, they've got Australia, Wales, and Namibia and Georgia, which I think are some winnable games. So I'm going to go ahead and back my boys, and I know that, again, nothing's ever been easy for us, despite what Tony Ridnell's saying, the sky is not falling. And, again, there's light at the end of the tunnel for them.
Yeah. And, there are many blessings in disguise here. And you already pointed out a couple. So let's revisit that very quickly. The one blessing in disguise is, even though we had losses, they were pretty close. So there's definitely some lessons to learn. A couple of tweaks here and there, and those and a few other things going in a different direction could have been wins. But, let's not dwell on that. We're looking at, okay, there's a tenacity in this team. There always has been. We know what the goal is. And sometimes when your back is against the wall, you get the best performances, right? And that's what typically countries like the US and other smaller nations have done. But they're also going into a 3-game series, this round robin tournament in November, which is kind of like a warm-up period. And we spoke about this off camera. So it's kind of a blessing in disguise in many ways. And then the final one that you have touched on a moment ago is that they're going into a group that, all groups are dangerous, right? They're all tough. But if I got to be able to pick, this is not a bad group, right? This is not a bad pool to be in. When you look at Australia, Fiji, Georgia, you feel like, hey, there's an opportunity here for the US to be able to come out with that elusive World Cup win and to be able to create an expectation that's higher given the opportunity. They just need to be able to seize it. But I also want folks to be able to understand the level of competition that we'll be taking on. So not only do we mention them, let's talk about what regions they represent and where they are in the world. So we've got Hong Kong coming through the Asia region, Kenya through Africa, and Portugal through Europe, USA, of course, taking up the Americas. The highest ranked side between all of those is actually the US, ranked at 19. Close on their heels, Portugal at 20. So I don't want folks to be able to go, oh, this is going to be something pretty easy. Yes, that's only statistics. Yes, that's only on paper, but we know that we have to bear this in mind. Kenya a little bit further down the log at 33. So yeah, there's definitely opportunities over others. We'll talk right now. Let me actually throw it out to you, Rob. Who do you think is going to be the toughest competition right there? Who would you like to see as that first game, that one that kind of really sets the tone?
Well, who's going to be the toughest competition and who's the first game are kind of I have 2 different answers for that. I'd rather play Kenya first. It gives you an opportunity to get a little bit of rust knocked out that perhaps because you haven't played for several months, get the rust knocked out. It's going to be a match that they should predictably win and win fairly handily. But I think the toughest match is going to be against Portugal, in spite of the fact they've beaten Portugal on 2 separate occasions by a 61-point differential. And they've actually gone 3-4 historically against Hong Kong at a minus 39-point differential. I'd still say Portugal, because quite frankly, we're talking about different teams in 2022 and 2023.
And even though you say those stats, I'm going to throw it back at you. I mean, the last time America played Chile, the score was 71 to whatever. So things
and
change.
that's exactly what my point was,
Yeah.
is that we're in 2022 and we can't go back in history too much. There's far too much history to be able to go back into those, past historical matchups to be able to predict anything right now. I just think Portugal is going to be a pretty tough ask. Don't forget that they've only qualified. Well, they've qualified because Spain was removed because of some violations. And I know that they had a pretty tough outing against Spain. Yeah, they only lost by, I think it was 5 against Spain. So, it's going to be the tough one, I think.
And absolutely. I'm kind of curious to hear the same thought from you, Dave. What do you think?
Yeah, I think Rob's got it. I think Portugal, they're going to be as good, if not better, than that Chilean team. They spend a lot of time together, playing together. I'd love to go back in time. If you go back to 2012, Scott Lawrence, who was a part of the current staff, was on that 2012 Junior World Trophy team.
Right.
And during that time, they beat Chile, Japan, and Tonga. 3 teams now that have kind of surpassed us in that same 10-year period. So, man, I'd love to go back over those 10-year times and figure out, where we were as a country and what our planning was. But unfortunately, we can't. And we've got to look forward. But I think Rob nailed it. Portugal's going to be the tough one. Things to consider in a 3-game tournament are things like red cards, like injuries. If we were to lose a Ruben de Haas or an AJ McGinty, that could hurt us. So maybe playing a Portugal up first, taking that one out of the gates, might set us up for the next success for the next 2. So I'd like to see Portugal first.
You touch on an interesting topic when you talk about these key players and the contribution. Looking at the chatter online through the MLR fan zone and all the great social media groups where everybody convenes online to be able to talk about rugby, and that's what we do too. So we follow these conversations, and a lot of people, and I'll throw this one back at you, Dave, because it came from your rant there. A lot of people saying that we rely too much on key players. We got McGinty. If we got McGinty, great. We got a great playmaker. We got a great decision. We got a clutch player in the right moments. Oh, we've got our De Haas, who's the guy, the right distributor. His box kick is where you need. His paces, all these things that we talk about key players, but we don't talk about the strength as a unit. We don't talk about the consistency of a team. Is that a part of the problem?
Oh, 100%. I mean, Rob mentioned that cohesion factor, and, AJ and Ruben, and, they're on successful careers overseas. A lot of the guys are here spread across the 13 MLR teams. That Selcom forward pack, I think 7 of the 8 of the Chileans played together for Selcom. Same with the back line. So those guys have played 4 times the amount of games, compared to our guys. So it's not an excuse. You got to give them credit. What they're doing down there in that model is working for them. As you mentioned, Uruguay used to be the repechage team. Then they were America's 2. Now they're America's 1, and now Chile's number 2, and here we are fighting for.
Clearly, something is working for South American rugby development. Brazil is also on their heels too. That's the next generation, right? You've got these countries that we seemingly overlooked for so many years, and while we weren't watching, they surpassed us.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned, what was the score line against Chile the last time we played them?
71 something.
Yeah.
Like it was a massive big difference. It was like 62-point difference or something like that, if I remember correctly, at least in that ballpark. And I'm not talking about eons ago. I'm talking about a couple of years, pre-pandemic, but that was pretty recent history. And Chile are on their way to the very first Rugby World Cup, rightly so. At the end of the day, whether you agree with the how the campaign was run or not, that's still the result. We've got lessons to be able to learn here. And you brought up something interesting a moment ago. Selcom, for those that aren't familiar, is the professional team that even a couple of years ago when SLA first started representing Chile was not doing very well. Their biggest competition was, biggest competitor was the Jaguares 15, who dominated, right, coming from Argentina. But they actually managed to beat them in the last season, right, surpassing, do really well. And it's all because of that consistency. And in Chile, there's only like 3 professional clubs. So the pool might be smaller, but it's a lot tighter. In the US with the MLR, we've got a lot of talent, but it's spread here and there. So there's the opportunity for players to play next to each other for a long period of time is smaller. You might have a pairing, but you don't have 7 out of your 8 players, starting players and your forwards, playing together week after week. That makes a difference, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely does.
Yeah.
What I think is interesting is, we were winning that second match 19-0, if I'm not mistaken, about 25 minutes in.
Even further, I think it was like until the 32nd minute. You're right.
And that cohesion, I think, can play a role. It played a role in that game in the sense that, we had them down on their heels. If we could have scored another try, I think we could have gone on the hoof a bit more and really pinned them down. But a team that has played together before, that has logged lots of minutes, that, when they look across and you see those eyes that you see every week, that you count on, that you're training with week after week, you kind of feel the need to go, okay, can't let that guy down. And they pulled themselves up by the bootstraps and scored a couple tries to really put themselves into position for a nice second half. That's what the cohesion does in my mind.
It also allowed for some depth, right? I mean, a lot of the guys who played in that first match were on the bench and emptied the bench for that last 25, 30 minutes, which provided a lot. And that's something, again, I think, we don't have, the 50 to 100 players, deep yet to be able to, provide that for Gary and the staff to be able to make some substitutions where obviously, Chile was able to do that into their advantage.
Don't we, with as many professional rugby players, really have that depth? I mean, Chile only has 3 professional sides. They've got 24 times less of a player pool than the US does. And these are questions that people are asking, and what I enjoyed about Chile, I'll finish the final thought here and I'll throw it back to you, Rob, talking about their performance in that last leg in Glendale. You mentioned a moment ago, they emptied the bench early. I saw guys coming on so late for the US that I thought should have come on earlier and made an adjustments earlier. They destroyed us in the scrum by the end,
Yeah.
Sorry, Rob, you wanted to jump in?
Well, no, I was going to say, and I think for me, these last 2 home and away matches have really convinced me that perhaps there aren't enough guys playing that are American qualified or are playing with US Eagles that are playing in high intensity matches,
right?
At the right times. And I guess what I mean by that is Chance Wangalewski. He's one of our top 4 to 6 props, right? He's coming in. He played in both the Chile matches. Where was he in the MLR final for the first 55 minutes, 60 minutes? He was on the bench. That's where he was, right? Where are some of these players that are playing? I mean, obviously, Cam Dolan, but some of these players are sitting on the bench in the most important MLR matches, and they're not getting that valuable experience in how to play in a high intensity, tight match and how to come through on a consistent basis. And that's what's most concerning. Yeah.
And you're kind of turning to a little bit towards a bigger question in some ways, which is, has the MLR been the contributor to the national team as it once was pegged to be? And yes, it certainly is a platform, but is it being used in the way that we want it to be used? And that's kind of a conversation that would evolve probably for another day. But it is an interesting point. If players who are eligible for the US are not given the opportunity to compete consistently at the highest levels and alongside the teammates that they'll be competing with at the highest level, how are they continuing to get the consistency that we want them to get? It's a tough question, right? So, gentlemen, before we head out of here, I want to be able to get your final thoughts as we lean towards and turn our attentions to the next task at hand, securing that final spot. What is your thoughts? I'll ask Rob as we started with him and end with you, Fee.
I'm going to be optimistic and say that we win the top spot, but I think it's going to come down to that Portugal match is going to be the obvious decider.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the toughest competition in the pool is what most people would agree. So, yeah, definitely. Dave?
Yeah, like I said earlier, nothing's ever been easy for us as American rugby players, and this is going to be no different. And I expect the boys to go over to Dubai and get it done, and look forward to seeing them in France in 23.
I like it. Optimism all around. And of course, you as rugby fans can tell us what you think at home. Maybe you think we're right on point. Maybe you think we're way off. And we'd love to be able to know what you think by following us under the handle at Rugby Rant Pod on all social media platforms. And you can share your thoughts You're free to rant along with us. And we hope to be able to hear that. But for now, we're going to take a short break and we'll be back in a moment with the opportunity to learn more from one of the great MLR insiders, Connor Cook, formerly of the Raptors, now, of course, recently retired after having had a wonderful season with Rugby ATL. We'll be back.
Tighthead Brewing Company is not just Chicago's premier location to watch rugby and enjoy quality ales and lagers. It is also a great place to enjoy local acts performing live music every Thursday and Saturday nights. Additionally, their Wednesday night trivia nights are something not to be missed. Tighthead is located in Mundelein, Illinois, and easily accessible for many Chicagoans, as it is just steps away from the metro. Owner Bruce Durr and the Tighthead staff are dedicated to ensure your microbrew experience is as tight as their beers. Bruce's love for rugby extends beyond the origin of his brewery's name. Tighthead is committed to supporting the rugby community. This includes his support for Lake County RFC and our own Rugby Rant podcast show. Tighthead's tap room is like the familiar rugby clubhouse in which friends and teammates can meet, socialize, and enjoy the wide variety of brews on tap. Regardless of whether your palate enjoys a good IPA or a dark barrel-aged brew, Tighthead can deliver. Hey, Chicago, when you want rugby, Tighthead Brewing Company will satisfy your thirst. Tighthead, it's worth more than a try.
And welcome back, rugby fans. Of course, it's that familiar time again where we put somebody special in rugby to the test in our RPK. You know that as the Run, Pass, or Kick interviews. Joining me as per usual is Rob the Hammerschmidt, but more importantly, less about us and more about our guest. Who do we have in the hot seat? None other than Connor Cook, by way of Major League Rugby, first with the Raptors through 2018 until more recently you took up reins at Rugby ATL, where you finished your time as a player. Many highlights through all of that, one of which includes being a part of the very first MLR Shield being competed against, of course, then Seattle, while you were with the Raptors. We're going to dive into this and much more through the course of this interview. But first, how about we give a warm welcome to Connor. Connor, welcome to the show, my friend.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me. I'm a huge fan. Excited to be here.
That was
well, we have one,
perfectly.
Ty. We have one huge fan.
One.
At least Connor's looking out for us. We appreciate that, Connor. It means a lot, actually. Kidding, but it means a lot for us to have a guy like yourself on the show. It's great to have you.
And I love to say that he takes direction really well. We actually scripted that response.
Checks in the mail, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Love it, love it.
Payday.
All right, folks. Once again, you know the format, but if you don't, it's best you learn how it goes. And I hand you over to my colleague, Rob Hammerschmidt, to take the reins.
Thank you, Ty. And for those of you guys who are new to the Run, Pass, or Kick interview, thank you for coming to see us. And thank you for coming to see, most importantly, Connor Cook share a little bit about who he is and what he's all about. But if you're not familiar with the format, Run, Pass, or Kick works like this. Each one of our questions will be prompted by Run, Pass, or Kick. And just like any good rugby player, Connor has to be adept at all three. And so he has a decision to make with each question. He can run with a question, which is to say that he's going to go ahead and answer it. And we've seen his hard-charging style, so I'm pretty sure he's going to run with a few of these. But Connor can also pass a question, which is to say that maybe it's too hot to handle or one that he doesn't really want to talk about, so he's going to go ahead and pass it. Or he can have fun with us and he can kick a question, in which case he'll let us know what he's going to do, and he can kick it to either Ty or myself, and that means we're going to answer on Connor's behalf. We're going to answer in a way that we think he would answer. And he can grade us out, tell us we were shite, tell us we were spot on, or give his answer a little bit more context. It's entirely up to him. So, Connor, are you ready for the Run, Pass, or Kick challenge, my friend?
I am.
All right. All right. We're going to get right at it with the first one. Now, I've got to put a picture up here, and normally Scott's behind the scenes producing the show, so let me just make sure I got it all set up there. There it is. There is the picture there. So I'm going to leave it up there for folks to see real quick. You've seen it. And so run, pass, or kick, Connor. I dug out this photo from 2018 on your social media. It appears to be a photo taken during your bachelor party. Is it true that all of you were jumping off the boat to avoid the strippers at your bachelor party?
Yeah, I'll run with that one. No, that's false. It was actually zero.
Like fake news. Fake news.
There's 0 women presents that entire weekend. Actually, it was very fun though.
Probably a giveaway with the hashtag #DuBoys.
Yeah.
I like it. I like it. You know, it just shows you the tone of the show that we have to be able to do some socially acceptable stalking online before we introduce before the first one.
Yeah. And it's not over. I got a few more bits up my sleeve. But what I did find interesting about that photograph, Connor, is a number you guys had the Colorado Raptors budgie smugglers on, and I know those are very much appreciated in the rugby community.
Yeah, I think it was Johnny Muscles that organized those for us that year. But yeah, we definitely all wore them for that trip. I think it was mandatory.
Mandatory, I like it. Yeah. Cool, man. Yeah, I was going to ask you if John Rodberg was in charge of ordering those bad boys, but it sounds like he did.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah, we had an episode much earlier in our seasons, and I feel like that same topic came up with him in a Speedo. So there's definitely a theme occurring. It's probably the first boy every time. You'd be like, "All right, you know what this needs? Budgie smugglers. Makes everything better."
he's always got them on.
And with quads like that, why wouldn't you?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. What is it that Dallin called him? The quadricep of eyeballs.
Yeah,
or the Quadzilla too. Yeah, that one too. There's probably quite a few themes there.
He's got a lot of nicknames.
All right. Well, let's turn our attention back to the man in the hot seat here, Connor Cook. Of course, we now know him to be an MLR staple, which, by the way, is a part of that elite 50 cap club, which we're going to be talking about throughout the course. Not to dive into too much detail right now, but we deliver question number 2 your way. Run, pass, or kick, my friend. You lived in both Hawaii and Colorado growing up. Gee, what a burden, right? Your childhood must have been awful. But what a great place to be when it comes to rugby culture in both those places. You know, they've both got a rich history there. So here lies my next question, though. Both have a rich rugby roots, as I mentioned a moment ago. How were you, in particular, introduced to the sport of rugby?
I will run with that one.
Sure.
So I was at a school in Hawaii called HPA, Hawaii Preparatory Academy, and they didn't have PE class, so you had to choose a sport for each kind of season. And if you weren't into sports, they had other just activities and such that you could enroll in and do after school. And so anyway, I didn't have a sport to do. I had ice hockey that I had then lost when I moved to Hawaii from Colorado, obviously.
Yeah, sure. Obvious reasons.
And so anyway, one of my buddies, we were in the dorm. I was living in the dorm at the time, and he was like, "Have you heard of rugby before?" And I was like, "No." And he's like, "Well, we have a team, and you should come out." And so anyway, I watched a video on YouTube about it. It looked really fun, and I went out and loved it. So the rest is kind of history from there.
Awesome. Was Jack Breen involved in that academy or in the rugby scene at that time when you were in high school?
I don't recall at the time. My coach that got me into it was Kevin Perry, and then he was the big coach that got me involved in it in Waimea.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And Waimea, is that on Kauai or is it?
No, it's on the Big Island.
Oh, it's on the Big Island.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow. Cool. That must have been a great experience. Yeah. Like Ty said, boy, that must have really stunk to be in Hawaii.
Yeah. I love how you also said you had to choose a sport for each season. Like what? Just summer?
Well, yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's awesome. So, but you also played football. And I think that it's important for people to recognize how many American rugby players start off in football and then transition at some point to rugby. It's kind of funny. And the Raptors now have they're the American Raptors, and they have push to get these crossover athletes. And I'm reading your resume and thinking, you're almost like that kind of crossover athlete, because you get a little bit of a rugby in high school, but then you really are engaged in football, and you go to Redlands University to play football there. But eventually you end up at Ark State, which we know is a rich tradition of rugby in its own right. So run, pass, or kick, how did you end up playing rugby at Ark State, coming all the way from Hawaii and from Redlands University?
Yeah, I'll run with that one as well. So going, from high school, rugby was very fun for me in high school. I really enjoyed it, but I did not even realize that, there was collegiate rugby. So my thing was always trying to get there. I also had played soccer, so I was kind of getting recruited for soccer and for rugby, or sorry, for football. And so anyway, I decided to go play football, and I was just a place kicker, and so it was fun. But I played a few games my freshman year, and quite a few my sophomore year. But I was just kicking, so I always knew that I could do more on the field, and I wanted to be on the field. And I got a call after, I think it was our homecoming game, from my high school coach, Kevin, and he had this opportunity to play at ASU. And I was thinking at the time, I was like, heck yeah, I'm going to go to, Arizona State. I was like, because Redlands was a really small school.
Ready for a party then?
Yeah, exactly. I was thinking, I was at a really small school,
country. Woo!
And I get on the phone with Matt Huckabee, and he's got this Southern accent, and I'm like, where did I just sign up to go? Or commit to play? And I started looking it up, Arkansas State. And anyway, I moved out there. So I went to Redlands for 2.5 semesters, and then went out there to Arkansas after that. Yeah.
Yeah, I get that. It's funny you said, like, you mentioned when you played football, you were just the place kicker and you wanted more. You wanted to be more involved in the game. And it's one of the merits for why rugby has been adopted across America in the way that it has. Many players in a similar position to you want to have the energy of rugby back and forth, be in the action more so. And it's what makes the game exciting. It's what separates it from some of the other sports, though, too, and what will continue to grow and what will continue to attract players just in a similar situation to you. And turning our attention a moment ago, you spoke about, transitioning from Redlands to Ark State. That's a pretty big deal, especially, when you think of the rich rugby history that Ark has. I mean, 2012, Sevens champs, right? 2013. Yep. And then also, I believe, made it to the finals of the 15s nationals as well.
Yeah.
And this all happened while you were around about there. You were there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So tell me, run, pass, or kick, what made that team different? What held that together? What was the special sauce?
Yeah, I'll run with that one as well. When I got there, it was a special time for Arkansas State. They were really growing a lot, and I think they were setting themselves apart, from other collegiate settings in the sense that they were able to give, not necessarily scholarships, but it was, for international students, they would be able to, believe waive their international fees. I believe that was the thing. And then they would get, around in-state tuition. That's at least what I would get as well. So there certainly was
some benefits.
So it was definitely, there's benefits. And so that was very appealing for, international students that were wanting to get over here. And then Matt had a huge tie to, forget the exact connection. It was also through one of the teachers at Arkansas State to South Africa. And he had gone over and watched
amazing place, great people. I'm biased, but yes.
He had gone over and watched the Blue Bulls training for a week or something. And anyway, so we had a big recruiting kind of funnel from there. And so we had quite a few South Africans. I'm sure you knew that at Arkansas State, especially when
I did it the old fashioned way. I married an American girl.
There you go.
Yeah. Nobody was interested in my rugby.
So, and then anyway, so we had a good mix of them, and, they brought a whole different, obviously knowledge of rugby and IQ. And so it just, and then he was good. Our coach was really good at recruiting, and so he just got a good bit of American talent, and then he had a good mix of foreigners.
Right, a little. It's like a couple of ingredients of this, a couple of ingredients like that, putting together the perfect blend.
Yeah.
So you heard it. Let me just state for the record, you heard it, everybody, from Connor Cook himself. If you want to make your team better, get a South African.
I mean, a rogue one.
It worked in Houston.
We're cheap. Okay.
So Connor, Ty mentioned that a bit of back that you guys had a finals appearance in 15s at Arc State. You were also part of the Raptors team that lost an epic finals battle to Seattle in the first ever MLR Shield, and I'm not trying to dredge up bad memories.
Yeah, I know. Like he had like a relapse. He's like a PTSD.
Yeah.
Like, oh.
Are they gonna beat me up with these questions?
I know where I feel like I know where you're going. It's been a lot of finals appearances.
But I'm interested though, because out of sometimes when you come up a bit short, you learn the most about yourself, and organizations learn the most about themselves. And so that's what I'm interested in here with this question. So run, pass, or kick. If you could go back and change anything about how you or the team prepared or approached or played for that match, is there anything that you would do differently with that hindsight and with the experience you've gained since then?
Talking just specifically Seattle.
That Raptor Seattle epic battle.
I mean, I think our prep. I'll run with it. I think our prep was good. I think it was just the execution, on game day. I think individual players as well. We had some silly penalties here and there that at critical times that just can really sway a game. When it comes down to kind of grand final rugby. That's kind of the best answer. Hopefully that helps a bit.
I think that's an important lesson for new rugby players in particular, is pay attention to those little details. You mentioned the penalties, and we've seen it frequently, both in the MLR and obviously most recently with the Eagles results, here this July, is that, penalties can kill you. And the Eagles committed a few of those penalties in that second match against Chile that potentially cost them, qualification. And so I think you bring up in a really important piece that a young player should be mindful of, is to really, don't commit those penalties. Just keep battling and play defense.
Yeah, it's a really, really good point. And, often what you see is when teams have been working together week after week, and over time, they develop that consistency, that cohesion, that under those pressure-filled moments, there's less likely for that to happen. And that's kind of it shows you how mature a team really is, that they can limit those amount of penalties in those high risk areas or those important moments. But often that's what separates it in finals. It's just the minutiae, those little things that can sway it in favor of 1 for or 1 against.
Yeah. And then I can answer one more part of that.
Sure.
For my personal prep, I was just thinking back on it. This was a few years ago. I was young still. I mean, not necessarily maybe to the game, but definitely at this level. And I mean, I still think to the game to some degree. So I think going back for like my prep, I could have done a lot more, studying on Seattle and how, they were playing, and kind of more, analytical on the competition, and then on myself as well, just leading up to it. I did a lot more of that. That was a big thing we focused on, obviously, here at ATL. And so knowing what I know now, I would have done a lot more of that back then.
I want to kind of follow up. This is a little off script, Connor, but since you brought it up, and I think there's a great opportunity to ask, somebody of your caliber to kind of reflect on this. We've talked to coaches and players about that very thing. How much time do you spend watching your opposition on film and paying attention to what they do and game planning for their game, and how much do you just lock down and focus on your game? What's What's the right balance for you as a player when you, as you grew and, you know, fell into that ATL system and really got engaged in both those aspects?
Well, I think it comes with a bit of a, you know, a learning curve. So, you know, you get efficient at it and then you don't have to spend maybe as much time. But leading up to that point, getting to the point where you are efficient at it, you might be spending, you know, a significant amount of hours each week reviewing yourself, you know, like you're saying, the opposition. And yes, there's, you know, balance between both. And then you also have to have time to just completely switch off as well, because you can just go crazy by over, you know, analyzing, and you know, you can get into your head and whatnot. So there's a healthy balance for sure. It's just kind of tweaking your prep each week, and kind of looking back, doing a review on yourself and seeing what worked. You know, did you need to spend more time in this area or less time here, you know, and just kind of doing a weekly review on yourself and fine-tuning your own process.
Yeah, there's always lessons to be learned, win or learn, right? That's the philosophy.
Yeah.
And Connor, it has been a pleasure thus far to be able to chat with you, but I wanted to take the opportunity with the pause we have right now to remind all our viewers that are tuning in that you can continue to enjoy this interview with, of course, the man in the hot seat, Connor Cook, formerly of the Colorado Raptors, or should I say Glendale first, then the Colorado Raptors, and then Rugby ATL, in all of his history and glory with, of course, Major League Rugby. We'll continue this interview on our new home at patreon.com/Rugby Rant Pod. But in the meantime, we wanted to be able to thank you all for tuning into this episode here on, of course, as you know, the Rugby Rant Pod. Connor, it has been a pleasure to be able to have you with us, and we thank you for your time. We remind everybody that you can get more of him at Patreon. But for now, we're going to say thank you, and we'll see you at the next.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.